Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, February the 8th, 2020. It is currently 8:03 a.m. Central Time. Well, I thought I was dreaming. And in my dream, there was some argument happening about a book. And these people were saying that this book offers an option that we should not take. It offers an option that is not biblical, that is not right. And in my dream, I was like, wait, what option is it offering, and why is it not right, and what is going on? And then all of a sudden, I kind of realized, wait a minute, I'm not dreaming. I'm kind of awake, but I'm kind of asleep. What is going on? Who's arguing? What option, what book, what's happening? And then I started to come to and kind of realize that I wasn't completely dreaming. I was kind of in that in-between stage of sleep and awake. And well, I always go to bed listening to something. And last night I was listening to Redeemer Broadcasting, right? WFSO, all right? It's a Christian radio station. And early this morning, they were having a discussion about a book, and there was a disagreement about, I guess, the option this book was providing, the solution this book was providing. There was a disagreement with the book. And at first I was dreaming. I guess this was like, I was kind of partially taking what I was hearing and putting it into some kind of dream form. I was like in a fog and all confused. And then I started coming to and realized, oh, wait. They're debating, or they're talking about this book, and they're claiming that this book is telling Christians to do something, and they're saying that it's the wrong approach, and they're basing their argument against it from, I think, Psalm 11, and I go like, what is going on? So I immediately got up, grabbed my iPad. I'm like, okay, I got to figure out what's happening here, and I kept listening, and I heard this title, The Benedict Option. The Benedict Option. And I started Googling the Benedict Option. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I remember. I've heard about this book. I've heard a little bit about it. And so I continued to listen. And this was what they were saying was very much a criticism of the book, saying that the book, they were basically saying the book accurately describes what is happening within our society, but the solution it offers for Christians to take is not correct. It's not biblical. It's calling for something that is not the way Christians should handle what is happening in our society. So I started doing some reading, started doing, article after article. Okay, the Benedict Option. Oh man, wow, this book's been talked about everywhere. And I found out that according to at least one source, the book, and I am quoting, I quote, already the most discussed and most important religious book of the decade. I was like, wow, that gets my attention. One of the most discussed and important religious books of the decade. I'm like, okay, I need to read this book. And then I started finding articles saying, hey, wait a minute. A lot of people are criticizing the Benedict Option. However, they're misunderstanding it. They're not reading it correctly. And then I found one article that says, hey, look, if you really want to understand the position the Benedict Option is offering, not only do you need to read the book itself, the Benedict Option, you need to read a number of other books as well, and you put them all together, and you'll have a correct understanding. You'll have a correct grasp of the philosophy, of the solution, of the ideas being promoted. But you need to read all of these books. So I grabbed my iPad, went to my notes, and I started writing down the names of all of these books and a description. And so what I want to do this morning is simply introduce all of these books to you, challenge you to read them, and then at some point we'll come back and have a more lengthy discussion about all of this. But let's start with the book that obviously is somewhat controversial, obviously not everyone agrees with. And again, according to one source, already the most discussed and most important religious book of the decade. All right, that definitely, now that may be complete hyperbole, but it definitely got my attention. So let's start with, I guess, this book. It is called The Benedict Option, a strategy for Christians in a post-Christian nation. All right, that gets my attention because I've been saying for a long time we're in a post-Christian country. America is now a post-Christian nation, and that Christians have to figure out how to live. What should we do? And I've stated it over and over. We need to be as wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. We need to have biblical wisdom, godly wisdom. We need to be thinking things through. We need to pay attention to what is happening around us. So here's a book called The Benedict Option, which is a strategy for Christians in a post-Christian nation. All right. I think everyone agrees we're in some kind of a post-Christian nation. I think everyone agrees we do need a good strategy. Now, is the strategy, well, what the author is calling the Benedict Option? Is that the strategy we should take? Here's some description from the book. And this all comes from Amazon.com. In this controversial bestseller, Rod Dreher, D-R-E-H-E-R, Rod Dreher, calls on American Christians to prepare for the coming dark age by embracing an ancient Christian way of life. All right. So now, again, you may argue this is a little hyperbole, but he is referring according to the description of the book, Rod Dreher, hopefully I'm saying his name correct, is calling on American Christians to prepare for the coming dark age. Wow. Are we on the verge of witnessing, of living through another dark age? Obviously, the author seems to think we are, and is telling us to prepare for the coming dark age by embracing an ancient Christian way of life. All right, now immediately when I read that, I'm like, okay, the Benedict Option, ancient Christian way of life, Saint Benedict, the Benedictine monks. Okay, I know where now I think I know where this is going, but so I'll just stop right here. Whenever I hear, hey, here's the problem, here's the solution, let's go back to an early stage of Christianity for the solution. There's been this has been a common theme within Christian books for a very long time. We need to go back to this, and we need to go back to this, and we need to go back to that. Does it always work? Is it always reasonable? Is it always rational? Is it always biblical? Well, we could get into a long discussion right there. But here's another book saying, hey, times are getting bad. Things are falling apart around us. We're on the verge of a dark age, and we need a solution. And the solution is to embrace an ancient Christian way of life. Let's continue. From the inside, American churches have been hollowed out by the departure of young people and by the word he has is a pseudo-Christianity, a kind of a weak pseudo-Christianity. So let's go through this again. From inside, American churches have been hollowed out by the departure of young people. All right. There's been lots of studies showing that young people are departing Christianity in large numbers, and that we have this pseudo-Christianity, this weak kind of pseudo-Christianity. Well, I've been talking about this for a long time. I haven't used the word pseudo-Christianity, but I've definitely used words like there is kind of a darkness that's crept over Christianity, an apathy, a deadness that has crept over Christianity, and we need to figure out what is going on. So I do agree that the church has been hollowed out. I don't know necessarily just by a departure of young people, but I think Christianity from the inside has been hollowed out by a spiritual lethargy, a spiritual deadness, a spiritual, almost like a cancer that has crept into the church. And I haven't been able to quite put my finger on it. He describes it as a pseudo-Christianity. All right. He goes, from the outside, speaking of the church, they are beset by challenges to religious liberty and a rapidly secularized culture. Okay. I agree that the culture is becoming more and more secular. There's no question about it. challenges to religious liberty. Okay. I'm not always, I haven't been the one to necessarily always sound that alarm. I think sometimes Christians overstate that, but okay. I think there has definitely been certain things that have happened where you're kind of going, ooh, wait a minute. That should be a concern for Christians. So, okay. So far, so good. This description continues. Keeping Hillary Clinton out of the White House may have brought a brief reprieve from the state's assault, but it will not stop the West slide into decadence and disillusion. All right. Now, okay. I agree that keeping Hillary out of the White House is not going to ultimately stop the direction of culture. It's not going to stop the West slide into decadence. I think that, and I've argued that many Christians felt like Trump is the savior. He's the here to fix everything. But I think our problems are spiritual, and Trump is not going to offer, it does not offer any spiritual solutions in any way, shape, or form. So I think that that's been another problem with the church. If you want to talk about being hollowed out on the inside by young people leaving in a pseudo Christianity, I think one of the things that's happened to the inside of the church is we've been politically hijacked, and we are looking to solutions to some of our problems from Washington and from politicians instead of scripture and spirituality. But he doesn't mention that. But okay, let's continue. Rod Dreher argues that the way forward is actually the way back, all the way back to Saint Benedict. All right, that's where I thought this was headed. All right, he was this 6th century monk, horrified by the moral chaos following Rome's fall, retreated to the forest and created a new way of life for Christians. He built enduring communities based on principles of order, hospitality, stability, and prayer. His spiritual centers of hope were strongholds of light throughout the Dark Ages and saved not just Christianity, but Western civilization. All right, now this is saying we need to go back to Saint Benedict and the 6th century monk who was horrified by the moral chaos following Rome's fall. He retreated to the forest and he created a new way of life, and he built enduring communities based on principles of order, hospitality, stability, and prayer. His spiritual centers of hope were strongholds of light throughout the Dark Ages and saved not just Christianity, but Western civilization. Yes, I know I read that 2 times, but I wanted you to definitely hear that. Now, I would stop right here and at least raise my hand. Now, I know this is just a description of the book, and I haven't read the book yet, but I would at least raise my hand and go, wait a minute. What are churches supposed to be? Aren't churches supposed to be spiritual centers of hope, strongholds of light? Aren't the church supposed to be, communities built on order and prayer and hospitality and stability and doctrine and theology and what is the church? So sometimes I always find it interesting that sometimes books are written and they seem to offer a solution where they don't mention the church, where I think the church should be central. Now, I'm not saying that he is not bringing in the church. Okay, we'll continue. All right. Today, now I'll continue with the description here. Today, a new form of barbarism reigns. Many believers are blind to it, and their churches are too weak to resist. Politics offers little help in this spiritual crisis. What is needed is the Benedict Option, a strategy that draws on the authority of Scripture and the wisdom of the ancient church. The goal, to embrace exile from mainstream culture and construct a resilient counterculture. So listen carefully. The goal here is to embrace exile from the mainstream culture and construct a resilient counterculture. So it's almost a call to withdraw from the mainstream culture. Let's pull back. Let's withdraw. Let's build these communities. And again, it says that the churches are too weak to resist. Well, this almost seems to be Hey, the church is too weak. The church is done. The church is finished. So let's pull back and let's create these communities that are not the church. It almost seems to be calling for a non-church option. And I would say the New Testament constantly put the emphasis on the church. The church. All right. Let's, this last paragraph here. The Benedict option is both manifesto and rallying cry for the Christians who, if they are not to be conquered, must learn how to fight on culture war battlefields like none the West has seen for 1,500 years. So let's read this again. The Benedict option is both manifesto and a rallying cry for Christians who, if they are not to be conquered, must learn how to fight on culture war battlefields like none the West has seen for 1,500 years. It's for all mere Christians, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, who can read the signs of the times. Neither false optimism nor fatalistic despair will do. Only faith, hope, and love, embodied in a renewed church, can sustain believers in the dark age that has overtaken us. These are the days for building strong arcs for the long journey across the sea of light. All right, so the Benedict option is calling for a withdrawal from mainstream culture, building communities based off the rules of Saint Benedict when he created these monasteries, when he fled into the forest and created these communities. They say that ultimately he saved Christianity, he saved Western civilization, and so it's calling for basically the same concept to happen in our day and age, to withdraw, build these communities in order to save Christianity, and I guess ultimately to save Western civilization. Now, is this the biblical option? Again, at least my initial concern, just from reading that, seems to imply the church can't help. The church can't do it. Now, I'm assuming within these communities, you basically build a pseudo church, I guess, kind of a de facto church that is, hey, we left all of our churches, we built these communities, and we form our own little, quote, community/church. And then there is where supposedly the solution is, and where we can then save Christianity and save Western civilization. Now, as I said, I read a number of articles. Typically, if you offer criticism to the book, what you are told, it seems from all the articles I read, is you misunderstand it. And that it's not really calling from a complete withdrawal. You're misunderstanding what it means by withdrawal. Okay, that may be true. And so I would challenge everyone to actually read the book. But what I was also told in multiple articles is, okay, to really understand the Benedict option, you kind of need to a more holistic understanding of this philosophy, of this approach. So you need to read a number of other books. And I have those books right here. So the first one is the Benedict option. The second one is called Out of the Ashes, Rebuilding American Culture. Out of the Ashes, Rebuilding American Culture. Here's the description of this book. What do you do when an entire civilization is crumbling around you? You do everything. This is a book about how to get started. The left's cultural war threatens America's foundations and its very civilization, warns Esselin, Esolen, I may not be saying the name right, Esselin, in his brand new book, Out of the Ashes, Rebuilding American Culture. They will tell you that babies in the womb are fetuses, that gender is a social construct, and that the backbone of society is government, not the community. And Out of the Ashes, Esselin outlines his surprisingly simple plan to take back American culture. Start at home, Esselin urges us to demand a return to values in our homes, our schools, our churches, and our communities, and to reject political correctness. We must become tellers of truth again, and people who are willing to hear the truths, especially when it hurts to hear them. All right. Now, this seems to offer kind of a different approach. This one is not calling for a withdrawal. This is calling for an engagement of the culture, trying to save it, trying to restore it, trying to bring it back. And it points to home, home, school, church, and communities. And we should reject political correctness. Politics doesn't seem to be the answer. We need to we need to start at home and demand a return of values in our home, school, churches, and communities. We should reject political correctness. And then the last quote in this description, we must become tellers of truth again, people who are willing to hear truths, especially when it hurts to hear them. So this seems to offer kind of a different approach. The Benedict option, withdraw, build communities. The out of the ashes, rebuilding American culture seems to say we are right there in the middle of it, but we begin to restore values to the home, to the school, and to our communities. And we reject political correctness, and it doesn't seem politics is a possible answer in this book. All right? So what I'm being told is you need to read these two together, and then you'll get a better approach. Okay, maybe so. All right, let's go to the third one. The third book is Strangers in a Strange Land. Strangers in a Strange Land, Living the Catholic Faith in a Post-Christian World. All right, Strangers in a Strange Land, Living the Catholic Faith in a Post-Christian World. Here's the description. A vivid critique of American life today and a guide to how Christians, and particularly Catholics, can live their faith vigorously and even with hope in a post-Christian public square. All right, this one definitely doesn't seem to be calling for a withdrawal from the mainstream. This seems to be talking about how to live our life out, our Christian life out in a vigorous way, right there in the public square. All right, this is from Charles J. Chaput, Chaput, I believe that's how that is spelled. Chaput, he is the author of Living the Catholic Faith and Render Under Caesar. Comes his new book, Strangers in a Strange Land, a fresh, urgent, and ultimately hopeful treatise on the state of Catholicism and Christianity in the United States. America today is different in kind, not just in degree from the past. And this new reality is unlikely to be reversed. The reasons included both, but aren't limited to economic changes that widen the gulf between rich and poor, problems in the content and execution of the education system, the decline of traditional religious belief among young people, the shift from organized religion among adults to unbelief or individualized spiritualities, changes in legal theory, and erosion in respect for civil and natural law, significant demographic shifts, profound new patterns in sexual behavior and identity, the growth of federal power and its disregard for religious rights, the growing isolation and elitism of the leadership classes, and the decline of a sustaining sense of family and community. So it seems what this book wants to do is try to give us insight into the dramatic change that is happening within society. They list a number of them. They say it's not limited to that, but they list a number of them. And then they make the argument that we need to understand these changes and then figure out how to live out our Christian life in the midst of these changes. And they seem to indicate, according to this book, that they're not going to be reversed. There's no going back. We're moving forward into a post-Christian world, and these changes are indicators of what is happening. Let me go through these again. Economic changes that widen the gulf between the rich and the poor, problems in the content and execution of the education system, the decline of traditional religious beliefs among young people, the shift from organized religion among adults to unbelief or individualized spiritualities, changes in legal theory and erosion and respect for civil and natural law, significant demographic shifts, profound new patterns in sexual behavior and identity, the growth of federal power and its disregard for religious rights, the growing isolation and elitism of the leadership classes, and the decline of a sustaining sense of family and community. Again, the name of this book is Strangers in a Strange Land, Living the Catholic Faith in a Post-Christian World, and it's by Charles J. Chaput. I'll go back and give you the name of all of these books in just a minute. All right? Then there's one other. Now, this next one is a trilogy of novels. I'm just going to give you the name of the first novel. It is called Strangers and Sojourners. Strangers and Sojourners by Michael O'Brien. Strangers and Sojourners by Michael O'Brien. This is the description. An epic novel set in the rugged interior of British Columbia. The first volume of a trilogy which traces the lives of 4 generations of a family of exiles, beginning in 1900 and concluding with the climatic events leading up to the millennium. The series follows Anne and Stephen Delaney and their descendants as they live through the tumultuous events of this century. Anne is a highly educated Englishwoman who arrives in British Columbia at the end of the First World War. Raised in a family of spiritualist and Fabian socialist, she has fled civilization in search of adventure. She meets and eventually marries a trapper, homesteader, and Irish immigrant who is fleeing the troubles in his own violent past. This is a story about the gradual movement of souls from despair and unbelief to faith, hope, and love, about the psychology of perception, and about the ultimate questions of life, death, and the mystery of being. Interwoven with scenes from Ireland, England, Poland, Russia, and Belgium during the war, Strangers and Sojourners is a tale of the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. It is about courage and fear and the triumph of the human spirit. Now, many articles said you need to read Strangers and Sojourners as well, because it's even though it's in a novel form, it brings all of these ideas together in this story, in this narrative. And so it offers a unique perspective of seeing these more theoretical and philosophical concepts played out in the form of a narrative, in the form of storytelling. So they believe that these books, again, the first book is Strangers and Sojourners, and they're a part. That's the first volume of a trilogy. All right, so let's go through these books again. Book number 1, The Benedict Option, a strategy for Christians in a post-Christian nation. All right. The second book, Out of the Ashes, Rebuilding American Culture. The third book, Strangers in a Strange Land, Living the Catholic Faith in a Post-Christian World. Hang on, let me go back through these again, because I didn't give you the name of the authors. The first one, The Benedict Option, a strategy for Christians in a post-Christian nation, by Rod Dreher, Dreher, Rod Dreher. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right. There's, again, the first book, The Benedict Option, a strategy for Christians in a post-Christian nation, by Rod Dreher. Right? The second book, Out of the Ashes, Rebuilding American Culture. All right? Out of the Ashes, Rebuilding American Culture, and I'll spell the last name of the author, Esolen. Esolen. Esolen is the best way I can pronounce it. Or Esolen, maybe. There you go. Again, that book is called Out of the Ashes, Rebuilding American Culture. Again, the author, Esolen. The third one, Strangers in a Strange Land, Living the Catholic Faith in a Post-Christian World. This is written by Charles J. Chaput, C-H-A-P-U-T. C-H-A-P-U-T. Again, the name of the book, Strangers in a Strange Land, Living the Catholic Faith in a Post-Christian World. And then finally, a trilogy of novels. The first one is called Strangers and Sojourners by Michael O'Brien. Strangers and Sojourners by Michael O'Brien. And again, that's the first volume of the trilogy. All right? Now, this is what I have done. I have bought all of those books. I may start with the novel first because I'm interested in the novel. Who knows? I may start looking at the others, and I may come back and do some more discussion and playing some interviews with the author of the Benedict Option, since that one is the one getting all the press and all the discussion, and that's the one that was being debated this morning. Well, in my dream / on the radio, and that one definitely looks extremely interesting. But here is what I would say. All of these books, it seems, or at least the books, let's set the novel aside for a second. All of those books seem to clearly argue that we're in a post-Christian America. I think that we can all agree on that. I think all these books are going to clearly outline that civilization and culture is dramatically changing. It seems all of them are going to make some kind of argument that the church is not in a good state, that the church is in a really bad state spiritually, that it's been hollowed out, that it's weak, there's just well, I don't know if they'll use this term. I'll use my own term. A spiritual deadness has crept in, an apathy, a lethargy. There's a lack of doctrine, theology. There's no spiritual vitality. There's no life. There's no passion. And that the church is not even seen as being a possible option, it seems, in some of these books. And that the culture is falling apart. The church is too weak. The church can't take a stand. And so we almost need to kind of create our own little, well, that one book described it as arcs, communities, to try to save the situation. Some of them seem to imply a withdrawal. Some seem to imply a taking a stand within, but there's a common theme here. And the common theme is this. If we look at the world, things don't look good from a spiritual perspective. That's a fact. The world is dramatically changing and moving not only away from Christianity, I will argue moving against Christianity. So that's going to put Christians in a difficult situation in figuring out how to live. Now, what is the solution? Well, I don't think the solution can abandon the church. I don't think the solution can be that. I think we need spiritual revival within churches. We need spiritual revivals within the lives of individuals. I think that cannot be ignored. Now, can we take principles from all of these books? Yes. Can we take information from all of these books? I just want to challenge you. Read the books, but ensure that you maintain a biblical perspective. The Bible calls us to be in the world, just not of it. The Bible calls us to go into the world and to make disciples, teaching, baptizing, teaching to obey. We seem to have a great commission. We seem to have a specific call in what to do. I'm not saying that these books are going to abandon those scriptural mandates, but I think we have to make sure that when we are reading these books, we don't lose sight of that. And I think what many will do, if they're in a church or looking at churches and feel like all the churches have failed them and are falling apart, they may look for solutions that how can we say it, that overlooks the church, that simply sidesteps the church, and they will abandon the church. And I think that is at least that's a preliminary concern. We need the churches to be strengthened. We need churches to be supported. We need people attending. We need people there. I think many people feel the church has abandoned them. I think many people feel that the church has left them. I think many feel that the church has said, look, we're changing. We're going to bring in all these programs and we're going to turn into this almost, entertainment center. And I think many feel like, well, then what's the point? Well, you got to seek out churches that are not like that. And you got to be willing to then strengthen them. But I think what happens is once you become disillusioned with one church, then every church you go to, you become disillusioned if they don't do church the way you want it done. And I think we have to be careful of that. There may be another book needs to be written in the midst of all these other books saying, hey, don't forget the church. Don't forget the church. Maybe that needs to be the name of the book. Don't forget the church. And all of these solutions and all of these options, don't forget the church. Now, to be fair, the one book did say we need to strengthen our churches, strengthen our homes, strengthen our communities. All right. So some of those books seem to be calling for the fight happening within culture. Some of those books seem to be calling a fight outside of the culture, but, well, all we can do is read them and consider the points carefully. But I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. Hopefully that was helpful. I apologize to reading the description of the first book. I wasn't the Benedict Option. I was still trying to come out of, still trying to wake up. So my reading there was not great, but I tried to go back and reread certain things. And if I didn't get a word correct, I apologize. But I just wanted to bring these books to everyone's attention. I would challenge you to read them carefully so that you can draw your own conclusions and that we can have a correct perspective about these. Read, but here's the thing. Don't just read the books in isolation. Read the books and discuss them with other people. Bounce off ideas, struggle with concepts, but most importantly, as you're reading these books, please, I beg of you, open a Bible and consider the scriptural mandates, how the scriptures call us to live, what the scripture tells us to do, because the scriptures have to be our ultimate guide and authority, all right? Sometimes these books come along and they're so popular and everyone is drawn to these books and embrace a solution. And what they ultimately do is sometimes move us further and further away from a scriptural solution and the scriptural mandate. I'm not saying these books all do that. I'm saying that we need to beware of that as a possible concern. All right. Because there's always these books that come out saying, we've got the solution. We've figured it out. This is what we're supposed to do. And you're kind of like, well, we all own a Bible. Maybe the solution has been there the whole time. So just something to consider. All right, I'll stop right there. Hopefully this was beneficial. I feel like I went through those books way too fast, but I at least wanted to get this out there. And trust me, we will come back and talk about all of these in the future because I'm going to be reading them. So we'll definitely be talking about them. And if you are reading them, give me your thoughts. newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. I know some of you are going to be thinking, I'm never going to read all of those books. And I would just say, why not? Open a book, read, think, struggle. All right. We as Christians spend a lot of time complaining about what's happening in the world around us. We spend a lot of time complaining about it. We spend a lot of time condemning what's going on in the culture. Well, maybe instead of complaining and condemning, we dig in and try to consider solutions and think biblically and think deeply about what is happening around us. All right. I think that's a better approach. So let me know what you think. newsif@yahoo.com. And, we'll stop right there. All right, this kind of an impromptu live broadcast for the Theology Central podcast, sharing some information about some books that you should read. If you need the names of any of these books or a link to them on Amazon, please let me know. All the books are available on Amazon. All of the books are available in the Kindle format. I purchased all of them for my Kindle. So I would definitely challenge you to get them in that format, or if you need to purchase the old-fashioned paper and hardback, they are available. I don't have the prices in front of me, but I don't get anything for you purchasing these books. I just think that we should consider what they have to say. All right, everyone have a great Saturday. God bless.